September 18, 1898. Late at night, in a silent alley in Beijing, a 33-year-old official walks alone toward a temple on the city's outskirts. His name is Tan Sitong, and he is the most trusted reformist secretary of the reigning emperor. The man he is going to meet commands the most modern army in the Qing Empire, Yuan Shikai. In his pocket, he carries no secret decree from the throne, only a short blade. He has told himself one thing: if Yuan refuses, kill him on the spot. 3 days later, before dawn, the gates of the Forbidden City close without the emperor's knowledge. 10 days after that, 6 reformist officials, Tan Sitong among them, are publicly beheaded at a vegetable market in the south of Beijing. For 103 days, they had tried to turn a 2,000-year-old empire into a modern state. Tonight's story is the final night of that reform, and the betrayal that ended it. To understand why this reform happened, we have to go back 3 years, to April 1895. That spring, the Qing Empire signed the Maguantiaoyue, known in the West as the Treaty of Shimonoseki. For the 8 months before, it had been crushed in a war against Japan, the Jiawu-Zhanjing, the First Sino-Japanese War. You have to understand, in that era, most Chinese still saw Japan as a smaller island nation that had once borrowed its culture from China. Losing to them cut deeper than every previous defeat to Britain and France combined. The terms were these: cede the island of Taiwan, cede the Penghu archipelago, cede the Liaodong Peninsula, pay an indemnity of 200 million taels of silver. That sum equaled roughly 3 full years of the Qing government's entire revenue. The news reached Beijing just as scholars from across the empire had arrived in the capital for the imperial examinations, held once every 3 years. These exams were the only path by which a Chinese intellectual could change his fate and enter government service. 1,300 candidates, led by a 37-year-old scholar from Guangdong named Kang Youwei, submitted a joint petition to the emperor. Reject the treaty, they wrote. Reform the country. Court censors intercepted it. It never reached the throne, but copies were made and they spread across the empire. From that moment, Kang Youwei became the voice of the reform movement. Over the next 2 years, the situation grew worse. Germany seized Jiaozhouwan. Russia leased LV Shungang. Britain took Weihaiwei. France took control of Guangzhouwan. The great powers were slicing China apart like a cake. An unprecedented panic gripped the country. If nothing changed, the nation itself would not survive. And on the throne sat a 27-year-old emperor, Gong Shidi. To follow what comes next, you need to understand the actual power structure inside the Qing court at this moment. Gong Shidi had ascended the throne at the age of 4. In name, he was the supreme ruler of the empire. But from the day of his enthronement, real power belonged to his aunt and adoptive mother, the Empress Dowager Cixi Taiho. By 1898, Cixi Taiho had controlled the court for nearly 40 years. In 1889, when Gong Shidi turned 18, she had formally retired, handing the business of state to her nephew. But only formally. Every major decision still crossed her desk. She moved to the Summer Palace, a vast imperial garden built along Kunminghu Lake, about 5 kilometers northwest of the Forbidden City, close enough to return at any moment, far enough not to be seen every day. On June 11, 1898, Gong Shidi issued a decree called the Mingdinggueshizhao, a declaration of the nation's direction. It was a declaration of war. But the enemy was the Qing Empire's own centuries-old system of government. Over the next 103 days, Gong Shidi issued roughly 40 reform decrees. The most important: abolish the Baguwen, the 8-legged essay. This was a rigidly formulaic prose form, the centerpiece of the imperial examinations. For 300 years, every Chinese man who hoped to enter government had spent his life, from age 7, memorizing and practicing it. Overnight, the emperor declared it would no longer be tested. Hundreds of thousands of men saw a lifetime of preparation rendered worthless. Imagine a government today announcing, without warning, that every medical degree was void. Other reforms followed. Established the Jingshi de Shuetang, the Imperial University, the ancestor of what is today the Beijing de Shui, Peking University. reorganize the army along western lines, build railways, cut redundant offices, encourage commerce and industry, send students abroad to study. But every decree made enemies. Scholars saw decades of study lead nowhere. The Manchu banner nobility, the hereditary military caste that had ruled the Qing for 2.5 centuries, feared the loss of their privileges. Thousands of officials who drew salaries for doing nothing watched their positions vanish on paper. In mid-September, the crisis accelerated. On September 14th, a remarkable visitor arrived in Beijing. His name was Yitung Bowen, known in English as Ito Hirobumi, a former prime minister of Japan and one of the architects, a decade earlier, of the Mingji Weixian, the Meiji Restoration. That was the process by which Japan, in 30 years, had remade itself from a feudal state into a modern power. It was the model Kang Youwei had urged Guangxudi to follow. Yitung Bowen's visit was officially private. But everyone in Beijing was asking the same question. Would the emperor offer him a position as advisor? When the rumor reached the summer palace, Tsushi Taiho's reaction was glacial. To her, it meant only one thing. The reformers were preparing to hand the dynasty over to foreigners, inviting the former prime minister of the country that had just defeated China to advise the Qing on state affairs. That was a line she would not let them cross. On September 16th, Guangxudi made a desperate decision. He summoned a general named Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai was 39 years old, commander of the right wing of the Xian Jianlujun, the newly created army. This was the only force in the Qing Empire trained on the German model, equipped with modern rifles and modern artillery. It was stationed in Tianjin, about 100 kilometers from Beijing. Among the armies of Qing China, it stood like a single modern island in a sea of obsolescence. At that audience, Guangxudi broke protocol and promoted Yuan Shikai to vice minister of the Bingbu, the Ministry of War, the equivalent of a deputy minister of defense. Then, according to the records that survive, he hinted at a task. Use your army. Eliminate Ronglu. Surround the summer palace. Force the Empress Dowager to return power to the throne. Yuan Shikai bowed and accepted on the spot. He asked for a few days to return to Tianjin and mobilize his troops. Meanwhile, in those same 2 days, the inner circle of reformers, Tan Sitong above all, realized they were running out of time. Memorials denouncing the reform were pouring into the summer palace. If they did not strike before Tsushi Taiho did, every one of them would die. But there was a question they could not answer. Was Yuan Shikai actually loyal? Tan Sitong decided to go and ask him in person. September 18, 1898, just before midnight, West Beijing, the Fa Huasi, the Fa Hua Temple. Tan Sitong walked into the side room where Yuan Shikai was staying for the night. He brought no guards. He brought no documents. He carried only a short blade hidden at his waist. According to the version Lang Qichao later recorded in his memoirs, Tan Sitong came straight to the point. You will march your army north. You will kill Ronglu. You will surround the summer palace and force the Empress Dowager to return power to the emperor. Yuan Shikai was silent for a moment, then asked, Is there a decree in the emperor's own hand? Tan Sitong passed him a sheet of paper. Whether Guangxudi himself actually wrote that paper, historians still argue today. Then Tan Sitong said something that left Yuan Shikai no honest way out that night. If you refuse, I will kill you here in this room. Yuan Shikai agreed. The two of them worked out the timing and the route in detail. He would return to Tianjin, mobilize the army, and strike on September 20th. Tan Sitong walked out of the Fa Huasi and back to his lodgings at the Luyang Huiguan, the provincial hostel of Luyang. He believed the matter was settled. On the morning of September 20th, Yuan Shikai left Beijing as planned and boarded a train back to Tianjin. But he did not mobilize the army. He walked straight into Ronglu's headquarters. He told Ronglu everything that had happened that night at the Fa Huasi, the disputed decree, Tan Sitong's threat, the entire plan of the reformers word for word. Why Yuan Shikai betrayed them, historians have argued for more than a century. The simplest answer is arithmetic. Ronglu commanded 4 times as many troops as Yuan Shikai did. Whatever loyalty Yuan felt for the emperor, He knew that the moment he moved, his army would be destroyed within 3 days. Ronglu rode for the summer palace that same night, September 21st. Before dawn, the Empress Dowager Cixi Taiho returned from the summer palace to the Forbidden City and walked into Gong Shidi's bedchamber. No one knows exactly what she said to her adopted son in that moment. Later that morning, the court issued a decree in the emperor's voice, but the words were Cixi Taiho's. The emperor was ill, it announced. The Empress Dowager would resume the instruction of government. In plain terms, she was taking the country back into her own hands. Gong Shidi was placed under house arrest that same day on Yingtai, a small islet inside Zhonghai, the central lake just west of the Forbidden City. Water on 3 sides. From that day until his death 10 years later, he never again left that island as a free man. The arrests began on September 22nd. Kang Youwei had been warned the night before by a coded telegram. He caught the early train from Beijing to Tianjin, boarded a British merchant ship in the port, the Chongqinghao, and fled, by way of Hong Kong, to Japan. Kang Youwei's 25-year-old disciple Lang Qichao took refuge in the Japanese legation in Beijing. Remember Yitung Bowen, who had met with Gong Shidi only days earlier? He personally arranged for Lang Qichao to be disguised as a Japanese national. Liang was smuggled out of the city by train and put on a ship to Japan. But Tan Sitong refused to run. His friends pleaded with him. They begged. Papers were ready. Horses were ready. He refused all of it. He packed up the half-finished manuscripts of his own writings and entrusted them to a friend to be delivered to Lang Qichao. Then he sat down inside the Luoyang Huiguan and waited. Lang Qichao would later record in his memoirs the words Tan Sitong spoke in those days. They are the lines that carry the spirit of the entire 100 Days reform. In every nation, reform has been bought with blood. In China, no one has yet shed his blood for reform. That is why this country has not flourished. If someone must begin, let it begin with me. On September 25th, he was arrested and taken to the prison of the Xingbu, the Ministry of Justice. On the wall of his cell, he is said to have written a 4-line poem. The final line reads, "I turn my face to the executioner's blade and laugh. What I leave behind and what I take with me, both are hearts of iron." The morning of September 28, 1898, Kaishirkou, in the south of Beijing. On any normal day, this was a real vegetable market where people came to buy food. The Qing used the same open square as their public execution ground. 6 men were brought to the square in ropes. There had been no trial. Tan Sitong, 33, from Hunan, a secretary at the Junjichu, the Grand Council, the Emperor's inner cabinet. Kang Guangren, 31, younger brother of Kang Youwei. Lin Su, 23, a poet from Fujian, the youngest of the 6. Yang Shinxiu, 49, a censor from Shaanxi, the eldest. Yang Rui, 41, from Sichuan. Lu Guangdi, 39, also from Sichuan. History remembers them as the Wusu Lu Junzi, the 6 gentlemen of the 100 Days. Over the next month, nearly every reform decree Gong Shidi had issued in those 103 days was struck from the record. The 8-legged essay returned. The abolished offices returned. The cancelled privileges returned. One thing Cixi Taiho did not touch, the Jingshi de Shuetang. Perhaps she thought a school posed no threat. That school is the Beijing de Shui of today, Peking University. The only thing that survived those 103 days. As for Yuan Shikai, the man who agreed at the FAHC and informed in Tianjin, his career rose from that moment without a single setback. 13 years later, in 1911, he became the last prime minister of the Qing Empire and personally presided over the dynasty's abdication. 4 years after that, in 1915, he proclaimed himself emperor and founded the Zhonghua Digua, the Empire of China. It lasted 83 days. Gong Shidi spent the final 10 years of his life on Yingtai. In November 1908, he and Cixi Taiho died within 22 hours of each other. That is a different story, we told it in episode 2. After the 100 Days reform collapsed, China's next generation of reformers reached a single conclusion. You could not reform an empire through its emperor. Every reformer who survived Kang Youwei and Lang Qichao in Japanese exile, and the younger men who would soon read what they wrote, Sun Yat-sen, Huangxing, Chen Duxiu, all came to believe the same thing. To save the country, the only way left was to bring the entire dynasty down. The morning the heads of the 6 gentlemen fell at Kaishiko, the fate of the Qing dynasty was cut by the same blade. From that day forward, all the dynasty had left was time. I turn my face to the executioner's blade and laugh. If you want to see how the noose tightens around this reform, one decision at a time, subscribe. We are working through the moments that decided China's fate in the final 60 years of the Qing dynasty, one episode at a time.